March 25th, 2021 work session of the Penfield Planning Board. We will begin the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thanks everybody for coming, both physically and virtually, and all of you out there in the world, millions upon millions who are watching our proceedings. Lori, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Hetzke,
Hetzke here.
Bastian,
Bastian here.
Knauer,
Knauer here.
Tidings.
Tidings here.
I don't see Jim.
I don't see Jim.
Is he on our Zoom waiting list? No, Jim.
Sangster,
No.
Sangster here.
O'Connor,
O'Connor here.
Weishar,
Weissar here.
Cometh,
Cometh here.
and Gray.
Okay. I'm going to read our little disclaimer next, and then we'll move on to our agenda. Due to the public health and safety concerns related to COVID-19, this meeting is being conducted remotely pursuant to the governor's executive orders, including Executive Order 202.1, which suspended certain portions of the open meetings law. The meeting is being video recorded and is being broadcast live on the Town of Penfield's website, www.penfield.org, and on the Town of Penfield's Government Access Channel 1303. Meeting will also be later transcribed, and I believe, is this being transmitted on all the different
Yep,
streaming?
you can find it on Roku, Apple TV,
Apple TV,
and
Oh.
number of different things, pay-per-view probably.
Facebook.
Pretty pricey pay-per-view, but worth it. Totally worth it. All right, we have minutes from the March 11th.
We do not have minutes from March 11th. We're still working on them. Lori's been going through them, rewatching the video and transcribing everything. We hope to have them for you guys at the April 8th meeting.
Right. Okay, let's move on to our tabled applications.
All right, the first tabled application is 1410 Penfield Center Road. It is the 3-lot subdivision where the Lot 1 will retain most of the acreage, 2 lots, each around 2 acres. Since we last met, they did go before the town board for their sidewalk waiver request. The town board did approve the request for sidewalk waiver. They'll still be giving us an easement, so if in the future sidewalks are out there, we can get them installed. We've also got a Part 2 EAF ready and a draft approval resolution ready. Staff has no major concerns. It's all working through small technical items at this point.
Okay, does anybody, Terry, I think this was
Yep.
yours.
Yep, unless anybody's got any issues. I'll make a motion to approve the Part 2 EF.
I will second.
Okay, we have that moved and seconded to approve the Part 2 EAF.
Hetzke,
Hetzke, aye.
Bastian,
Bastian, aye.
Knauer,
Knauer, aye.
Tidings.
Tidings, aye. Then I'll make we'll push through the a resolution for this application.
I will second.
Okay, we have a
Hetzke.
motion to approve. Hetzke, aye.
Bastian,
Bastian, aye.
Knauer,
Knauer, aye.
Tidings.
Tidings, aye.
All right,
All right.
item 1 done.
Second application item is 1810 and 1820 Fairport 9 Mile Point Road, the Excelsior mixed-use development. At the last meeting, there was a lot of discussion on it in the work session. Board member Burton requested some thinking time for you guys to sort of mull it over and go over the application. So at that meeting, we did not, I believe, Bob made a motion that we do start a sketch letter, but for the board to have more discussion and deliberation at this meeting. We do have Bill Price and Rob Fornataro with SWBR on the call with us here. So if you do have any questions for the applicant, they are available. In addition, we printed off our checklist for you guys, our criteria checklist. So if there are areas you do have particular questions, it should help and serve as a guide to go through it.
Why don't we go through some of the notes that staff had, just a brief overview that we want to put in the letter, and then I want to go over some of Jim's comments that he submitted early in the week, and I
Okay.
have some comments on those comments,
Okay.
and then we
Brad, can
can
you pull
all-
up the PRC memo that staff sent out, so we can go over a few of those comments? I think one of the first comments we had, staff was supportive of the architecture. There were a few areas in which the buildings sort of rose up a little higher than what our maximum guidance is in the mixed-use development manual. In the manual, it's 4 stories or 55 feet.
Right, and there's one area that's 71
There's
feet or
one,
something.
it's about 71 feet. There is some challenge with the property. It does slope, going away from Route 250, it does slope down, so that the tallest face would face east towards Dublin Road. But it still would be very visible from Dublin Road because there is only the farm fields of Wickham Farms to sort of separate those buildings from Dublin Road. And Dublin Road does, it dips down behind the property and it does go back up again towards Dublin Road to the high point where Oak and Apple currently is.
So, my personal feeling on that is that to me is not an enormous deal breaker. But I would like others' opinions on that particular point. If that's going to be a point of contention moving forward, then we should probably put that in the letter, that the building height will be an issue.
Yeah, I know if you look at the site from 250 going east, it looks like the topography kind of rises a little bit and then it drops off.
Yeah, so
And I-
right along 250, it does go up very briefly, sort of towards where the front of the house, the existing house currently is.
Right.
And it then drops down. There's a low point there where there's a little bit of a creek and a wetland area, sort of the back of what they're proposing for their 6 acres. And then it sort of gently rises back up through Wickham's farm market area. There's a bit of a subdivision back there, the Edenfield Drive Court is back there. It sort of rises through that up to Dublin Road, and then Dublin Road, it steeply rises on the east side of Dublin Road where Oak and Apple is. So that Oak and Apple is, I believe, somewhere around 80 or 90 feet above the low point of this property. And the front of the property to the rear of the property does drop, I believe, about 20 feet from the Route 250 to where their rear property line would be.
And the code height is 50?
Our mixed-use guideline is in the Zone A, which is
Yeah.
where this project is taking place entirely within our, the Zone A high-density area, is 4 stories or 55 feet.
55.
Hey,
So
Doug? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't know if, I'm just thinking what it would look like if you took the road surface on 250 and had like a sight line
Oh, so the elevation of the
55
250
feet up, and if everything would fit below that line, or if you took the highest topography of the property close to the road where there's a little bit, I don't know, it's 5-10 feet, and use that as your baseline, one of those two, and had a 55-foot line, what that would look like.
Okay, we can certainly see if that's something they can pull together. When we do go to preliminary final, we generally do request, especially in the mixed-use district, either renderings or 3D
Right.
elevations, things like that, that can help the board get a better idea of how it would look on the site. So in this case, that could be something that we ask for, is either a line drawing or perspective drawing, from Route 250, what it would look like from the front in terms of in context with
Exactly, yeah.
with everything around it, to see sort of how imposing the buildings might be at their current height, as well as at the 55-foot maximum. I believe based on, because the primary building that is above the 55 feet is Building D. That is, the front side of it is higher than, or the west face of it is at a higher elevation than the east face. It is on part of the property that slopes down. So the front face, I believe it's about 59 feet from the road level to the top, but because the topography slopes down, and on the east face we're measuring it from the ground level to the peak, it's at 70 feet because it does slope down about 11 feet to allow to where they're going to do their sort of under building parking
Right.
in the garages. So it is on the slope, or it's seated on the slope, so it'll look shorter from the west side than it will the east side because of the topography.
Doug, did you check with the fire marshal on that? I recall back 15 or 20 years ago when Ellison Heights first came in, I think it was Ellison Heights,
Yeah.
they were prevented from building taller than the code because that was the maximum reach of the fire and rescue for the fire department. Now, I don't know if that's still the case. Again, that was 15, 20 years ago, but that may be the driving factor why that's in the code.
That was actually approved for 7
Yeah, that went up as
8
high as they
stories.
could with a hook and ladder truck, whatever. I'm not in the fire department, but that was one of the factors in why there's a height restriction. So that's something I would check into.
It's something we can certainly look into. I did not get any comments from the fire marshal to that effect. I do
Okay.
know there is differing values. There's sort of a calculation they do based on how close the road is to the building.
Right.
And that the further the road
Right.
is away from the building, the further they have to go
Right.
out, restricts how far they can go up.
Right.
So I can double check with the fire marshal, and he'll certainly have a hand, especially in a preliminary review
Okay.
of it. But it was not a comment that I received from him that it would be
Okay.
too high
Just
for them.
double
Yep.
checking.
So in principle, is this height, proposed height, big issue, medium issue, little issue, no issue?
I'd say, in my mind, what it looks like, a rendering from the road,
Yeah,
how it presents itself as people are driving by, and then also scaling it with the mixed use across the street.
yeah, and I actually wouldn't mind seeing some type of perspective from, what is the cul-de-sac over there, Edenfield?
Edenfield.
That's basically, it's all fields in between the two.
Right.
And is it gonna be a giant mass viewable from back there? What will it look like? I wouldn't mind seeing that, I guess, juxtaposed against, I don't know if that's the right terminology, but being able to see that type of perspective on that from there.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, and depending on where it, how this evolves, projects in the past, we've had the developer float a balloon up there at that height
Yeah,
and make site observations at different points.
right, right. Okay, we can move on from the height thing.
Okay. So one of the other requests of staff, and I know the board alluded to this as well, is that staff was looking to see if they could provide a trail running from 250 to the pond area on the back along the south property line. Some of their amenities feel sort of closed off. You know, if you didn't know the trails around the pond existed or the common house existed and you hadn't been fully through the development, you'd have no idea they're there or how to get to them. Some of the pedestrian connectivity is not ideal always. So we were hoping to get either a trail, whether it's done as a sidewalk or a stone dust path along the south side to get to that rear pond area, whether there's a signage up at the road saying that it is a public access trail.
So south of Building C.
South of Building C. And it ties in overall to, staff had some issues with pedestrian connectivity. That was one. Another area is the gathering area between Building C and D. It's right in off of the road as you come in. So it's in a sort of a high traffic area. Because all the traffic coming into the site will be passing through that, and it'll be a busier corridor. In addition, if you were at that site and you're trying to go south, you know, towards Building E or towards the common house, and you're a wheelchair user, there's no easy way to get around there. You'd have to go all the way around Building D because the path going south.
Or maybe there will be an elevator in Building D that.
There will be,
somebody
so you
in
could go through the
and then
building, but from
go
the, if
inside.
you were in the outside, you were gathered there with friends, there's only stairs going east. So you'd either have to go all around the building or through the building to navigate around. You couldn't go straight from that gathering space and follow along one of the paths. You would have to either go all the way around Building D and E to follow the sidewalk as it goes down through the grade, or figure out a way to navigate down the stairs. In that, the
Okay,
sidewalks were also relatively narrow. We typically look for wider is better in the mixed-use project, just because we do try to focus on multi-modality, whether somebody's a bike user, walker, kids on scooters. In other areas of town, we do have a 5-foot sidewalk. The focus is putting bikers or something on the street. But having sort of a multi-use trail instead of just a traditional 5-foot sidewalk is something that we emphasize within the mixed-use district, because it allows to keep slower and less protected users out of the road network and keep the road network generally for automotive traffic. Outside of the possibility of doing complete.
So I
streets
think
with
it's,
dedicated bike lanes.
We could certainly put in the letter to consider widening sidewalks. That makes sense. Because of the site topography, to me, we could certainly bring up the wheelchair accessible route from that gathering area between C and D down to Building E without going all the way around. But, if there's, I'm going to guess that Building D is going to have an elevator and it's going to be accessible. I don't know how feasible
Okay.
designing some ramp system around there. I don't know. I don't know. How's everybody else feel about that? Certainly could be in the letter.
In general,
But-
pedestrian accessibility and wheelchair ADA compliance, so forth.
Yeah. There's, I guess there are, the question is, if somebody's in a wheelchair and they're up top, can they get down to Building E? And how is that accommodated? Right? And, is it, do you, okay, well, we eliminate building C so that we can have this switchback ramp system so that people in wheelchairs can go down. And is that something that we should do? I don't know. You know, if it's accommodated in some other way, is that okay?
But I think.
I think we should ask them. I mean, they should have definitely, I mean, most new projects do have ramps,
Yep.
especially in complexes like this on each area to, you know.
Yeah, because it's all about accessibility on the site, so it should be,
I'm sure,
Right.
I'm
Well,
sure.
They're gonna have to comply with New York State code.
Yeah, exactly.
Correct.
right.
It doesn't hurt to put it in there. I'm sure they're gonna address it anyways, so I agree.
Okay. Okay,
I'm sure they won't have a problem with
If you'd like, a lot of staff's comments were also shared within Jim's comments. You know, my other comment would be regarding several of the amenity spaces and the delineation between public and private gathering areas. In general, the mixed-use development manual does provide avenues for both and suggests that even that there should be certain private gathering areas. If there is something that is generally considered an amenity of the apartment complex or the apartment areas, residents, that it is okay to have, you know, so separate accommodations or gathering open spaces between the two. So, and that it could even be helpful to differentiate between amenity spaces that are primarily or designated for the residents and ones that are designated for the town at large or for the mixed-use development area, you know, once it's built out. So I know myself and Burton both had comments relating to trying to better define how the gathering areas are, you know, cohesive with the design of the mixed-use development. You know, are they located in such a way that they provide adequate access or ideal access for community members or residents? And is there appropriate separation to delineate so somebody would know, you know, this is the apartments, you know, this is the residence area to hang out and gather with each other. This is the, you know, community at larges or, you know, the commercial users or general public's gathering areas, and sort of figuring out a split between the two, so that you are providing the necessary amenities both to the public and to the residents. So one of our comments was, in staff's opinion, we think the dog park, if a dog park is included, would more likely fall under a resident amenity rather than essentially a community amenity. They're very desirable in apartments around Rochester. We've seen them popping up, you know, even in Penfield. You know, we've gone through permitting now for at least 2 or 3 dog parks at apartment complexes in Penfield in the last year or so. So, you know, we understand it is a desirable amenity for an apartment user, especially an apartment user with a 4-legged family member, to have. But whether it's something that is open to the public is sort of, staff's opinion is that it should more likely be private or more likely be within, you know, the apartment users, because it would feel intrusive for the general public if you are somebody who lives in the apartment and you frequent the dog park, having somebody who you may not know or whose dog you may not know the history of, you know, in the dog park, especially when there are publicly available dog parks, you know, at Ellison Park and in other areas in our community. Having an appropriate division of whose amenities are whose and how they are situated within the development is a concern staff has had.
Personally, I think that's another thing that, you know, on the one hand, our manual is asking for community amenities that makes it welcoming for the entire community. On the other hand, it is also asking for amenities that are meant only for the residents, and where's the balance?
Yeah.
And with an actual submission, they need to find that balance. And I know, at least my experience and observations of the meetings leading up to the sketch plan, there was a significant focus on community amenities. And so it's possible that these were made community amenities for the general public to satisfy those concerns. And we do need general community amenities. I just want to caution all of us on, well, if I'm sitting in the opposite chair, is it, well, okay, which is it? You know, we don't want to look like we're never, today we want it this way, tomorrow we want it the opposite way. And I just want us to be cognizant of that.
And we do try to focus on ensuring that those, especially ones that could be considered sort of like the dog park, could be considered sort of part of their open space or non-developed area, or, you know, any paths or amenities that aren't, you know, could be considered, you know, a benefit without, you know, having it to be both a full community benefit and a private benefit, is that, you know, something being a private amenity is not going to take away from sort of their tally or their you know, their breakdown on what is certain spaces. We do try to, you know, understand and balance that out so that, you know, the focus isn't on making everything a community amenity or a, you know, a town-wide amenity, general public amenity, but understanding that there are things that can be private amenities and that we're not going to hold that against any developer coming in, you know, doing one of these projects, that it's not a hindrance that they have to design around, and that it is something we do want to see incorporated in the community, because it would help, you know, create a vibrant community, having some of those private amenities for the folks who are living there.
Sure. Okay. Do you want to go through some more of those, or do we want to potentially address Jim's?
I think if we go through Jim's, we'll hit a lot of them.
Okay.
We
Okay.
did share, Jim and I did share some common concerns, so.
So one of the things that Jim had brought up in his notes, and you guys all may be aware, but people watching and so on may not be aware. Some of the comments were that the lack of a central village square, that, you know, a central, almost like a meeting place or whatever, a central point of a village type situation. And I definitely think that those features are critical to the mixed use district as an overall general thing, and that it may be, well, it's not our singular biggest challenge with this whole district, but it is among the top challenges of this district. Because if we, depending on how hard we push for a central village core in every single development, we're going to have 50 different little village cores in the mixed use district. And do we want that? My opinion is we want the overall district to be a cohesive
Right.
place, that you almost don't know that I went from this development to the next development to the next development. Or, you know, you may, but it all feels like the same town, the same village, it's one space that flows naturally from one to the next, instead of being discrete. All right, here's this one and this little community, and boom, here's this other little community that, you might as well put up fences around or something, but
Yeah, and the property to the north that's currently for sale is in that district, and I thought, I don't know, maybe it should be looked at. Are there any opportunities for a cross-connection, depending on what happens with that north parcel?
you're talking about connecting from this parcel to the north inside the parcel other than
Right.
Route 2. Oh, absolutely, we need to have
Yeah.
that. And I think that the roadway, the north-south road, between buildings A, B, and D is meant to do that.
Okay, yeah.
That,
And then that would also, if that whole parcel to the north was developed, wherever the curb cuts were, you've got 250 and then also Sweets Corners
right.
Road. And then doing that would enlarge that community. I don't know how big a parcel,
I think
Or-
the remaining acreage is around 20 acres, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay,
Maybe
so
a little
it's-
smaller than that.
it's substantially bigger.
So yeah, so it's about 18 acres, I think, is what they'll
Okay.
approximately have left over once about an acre and a half subdivided out.
Okay.
So that is
Yeah.
something, and we understand, staff understands a little bit that this is a sort of a smaller chunk. On the west side of the road, we have, starting with that pedestrian spine that we intend to have run all the way north and south through that, area is a very large, it's a very large area that will probably have multiple developers. But it's a larger area to have that focus on, to do something like a large pedestrian mall, which is sort of what they are, the current development as well as proposed future developments that, haven't come before the board yet. They're not official applications yet. Have looked to do is to have that central pedestrian wide spine with greenery or business fronting around it, to have sort of a pedestrian mall that runs between the developments and is cohesive, so you'll know they're not the same developer or the same builder going along, because the buildings are not going to be the same. They're not going to be designed exactly the same way with the same architecture. We
They
do want to have that
should
variety,
be
but there is
complementary,
something,
but-
there is something that, having that pedestrian spine that you can go all the way up and down it, hopefully all the way eventually to Atlantic Avenue, and it'll have that cohesive feel where even though they are separate developments, this centralized pedestrian spine, provides that sort of necessary connection and cohesion between the separate developments. This is a smaller corner. It is just two properties. And it sort of connects on that corner, so there's less opportunity for it to have greater connection to the rest of the future developments, because it will either have to, figure out some connection between the west and east over 250 or over Sweets Corners Road if there was some design to connect it across to the other properties on the east side of Route 250 or on Fairport 9 Mile Point Road. It is sort of separated from the rest of those. Staff understands that's more of a challenge to try to create a cohesive village that is integrated with the rest of the developable mixed-use development area or district, being such a small area, but it is still something we're trying to heavily focus on, is, having some form of interconnectivity with whatever is built to the north and to some degree to the east, because the property will sort of wrap around this on two sides. the rest of the district.
This, well, this ends at the wetlands.
This ends at the wetlands.
east.
There is property behind that is still currently on, Brad, can you bring up
Yeah, bring
the two parcels? So
So the wetlands are just that
so that-
pond in the middle and.
yeah, so that pond area right along sort of the west side of that is going to be the property boundary. So there will be property to the east of this that will eventually abut up to Wickham Farms property, but there will be property to the north and the east that is undeveloped, mixed-use zoned areas. It is smaller and sort of segmented on its own there in that corner, but we still believe, or staff believes, there's more that can be done to create a cohesive village, whether this corner has its own village feel to it, being separated by two roads from the rest of the mixed-use district, by Sweets Corners and by Route 250, whether it has its own sort of village feel there on this corner, or whether there's some way we can integrate it a little bit more to the rest of the mixed-use properties to the west and to the north. And even to some degree to the east, because a portion of Wickham's property is zoned MUD.
So you drive in or walk in, turn east to go into this, and what is that, 200 feet, 300 feet away is this sort of little square in between building C and D. And there's a retail office building immediately on your right when you pull in. Then building C and D in front of you. Building D has shops and restaurants, whatever, whatnot, on the first floor, and apartments on the second floor.
Second through fourth.
So you turn north there, and you have residential on your left and kind of commercial and residential on your right. So is that enough of a villagey feel for us? Are they moving in the right direction? Is it acceptable? Or not?
I don't have a problem with it. I mean, it's the community effect. It's not like across the street, let's face it. It's not. So I don't know, as far as the community feel, I mean, the only community feel I can see is the retail part of it. So hopefully they're gonna fill all the retail things, and I think it'll be nice, but I don't think it's like, except for the people that live in there are the ones that are gonna be spending most of the time, depending on what retail shops they bring in. Other than that, I think it's totally different from across the street as far as that community feels. So you either gotta live with that and say, okay, that's gonna make it for this particular parcel, and then maybe the next one, more like we did across the street, the community thing where they can do the food trucks or whatever in the center and enjoy themselves. I don't see that at all here. But I don't have a problem with it either. I mean, it's just different, it's part of that, as long as they identify with the, everything in that area that's supposed to be, then so be it. I don't know if we've had a lot of good or bad input from any of the neighbors, what little neighbors there are around there. Have we had anything, to your knowledge?
We
Nothing.
haven't had
Not a lot of public input.
not a lot of public input.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of,
Brad, can you
a lot
bring
of
up
people
like
are
the
gonna go
colors
by there.
rendering?
Maybe we should expand, the net that we usually throw out just within a mile or whatever to get more feedback, because 250, I just think it should be open wider for more input from that aspect. And then my thing was, the traffic, the traffic, in and out of the location. I brought that up. I think Jim actually may have mentioned it, and somebody else, and then, that one entrance there, that's I think a good concern we should look at. Somebody from the Y called last meeting and talked about it, which I agree. I mean, that's a busy intersection, so if that one light, I believe, they're looking at using it, which if DOT, I mean, they're gonna have to look at that anyways, but, I mean, we definitely, from our standpoint, should look at that, getting in and out of there, and how that traffic flow is. The retail, you know, I mean, I don't know, you know, if they have any, do they know what kind of retail they like to see go in there? I mean, I don't know. I mean, do we need that much retail, I guess? You know, I know it's tough to take a guess, but I know we went did that across the road there for that application. I mean, there's a lot, you know, there's still a lot vacant over there. So as long as they're aware of it, I mean, I'm sure they don't want any vacant retail space either. And we certainly don't want that, especially in a new project like this in 250. So we definitely got to take a look at those things. And that's it for me. Here we go.
Comments?
I think, my own opinion is it's got more of a commercial feel than a community feel. That's just when I look at it, and I try to, you know, envision it in the future with the buildings up and the parking and everything, I don't get a community feel there. I agree with, you know, some of Jim's comments. So, and I don't want to jump the gun, and I still have a concern on getting people from the east side to the west side of 250 and back. To me, that's how do you safely provide pedestrian access to the YMCA? I mean, that's a big amenity, face it. People are going to live there across the street from it. They're going to want to use it.
Oh, yeah.
And I think crossing 250 right now, it's, you know, it's, well, difficult at best.
And that could be something we talk to the DOT and see if there's some signalization timing and things they can do.
Something, and, you know, with the potential development to the north, you know, maybe there's some way they can partner for a bridge, a tunnel, something like that.
I think the tunnel / bridge idea for the, you know, I don't know if this justifies it.
Right.
The entire parcel may very well
Yeah.
justify it.
Yeah.
And I do think that over time, if there's a crosswalk put in, pedestrian will walk, don't walk, which I think already exists there. You know, I cross 441 at Watson Road on a pretty regular basis, and 441's a pretty busy road. And, you know, I see people crossing it all the time. So it's
Right.
not, and as someone who travels it often, the more people that you see crossing it, the more you expect to see that. Right now, nobody expects to see anybody crossing 250. Somebody's crossing 250, you're like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
What's the speed limit there?
Speed limit is 50.
50? Yeah.
So that might,
And it's 45
Yeah.
at Watson and 441.
Okay.
So
And
it's
of
not,
course, everybody drives 45.
yeah, oh yeah, nobody drives over 45 on 441.
One of the things we can discuss with the DOT is something they just implemented, or county, at least the county just did at the intersection with the high school drive and 5 Mile line, is they're working on doing more delayed greens. So if there are pedestrians, especially if a pedestrian has hit one of the ped buttons, it will delay the green of the opposing lanes by 3 or 4 seconds, so that the pedestrian has
Okay.
a head start to get across while
Right.
all
Yeah.
lights are red before it turns green for
Well,
the
it's a challenge, no
pa-
question.
yeah, for the
And it's
parallel
probably
traffic
unfair
flow.
to hold this one developer responsible for it, because there's going to be other developments.
100%.
It'll require input
Yeah,
from
100%.
DOT, and we're hoping as part of the 239M review that the DOT will be involved on voicing their concerns and figuring out
Okay.
a good pedestrian crossing method there.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Where are we going with this? I forgot where we were. In terms of reviewing, I guess, Jim's agenda items.
So you just talked about layout, village feel. I know you mentioned Bill, you mentioned parking. That was a concern staff had and a comment we made. Several of the buildings do have underground parking for a few units. They'll have, I think 9 or 10 in D and E or D and C. We did make a recommendation that they see if there's a way they can figure out alternative parking methods, whether there's additional covered parking or working it in, whether they can find more garage units to reduce some of the parking areas so there is less. It doesn't look like there is as many parking lots or parking areas.
Right.
So it does provide a less auto-centric feel to the development.
Okay.
Yeah, essentially, we want these areas to be live, work, play, right? And does this meet that? In some ways, they do have components of each one of those.
Mhm.
But does it need to be autonomously that way?
Well, do they meet the requirements for the parking?
So in the mixed-use development area, we do leave parking as sort of more of a question mark. Because there is the emphasis on shared parking between developments as well as emphasis on finding alternative methods in multimodal transportation. We do, I don't know off the top of my head what whether we have a strict requirement. It's usually, we do require sort of a shared parking analysis to figure out and to help ensure that there's just not a sea of parking.
Correct.
In the
Yeah.
development that, as they develop out and whether they develop with the neighbor, figuring out whether, parking may be installed now that can be removed later and converted into open space, based on the ability to share, parking demands between, the multiple developments as we hope to see them develop out. And it's discussions we've had with Penfield Square across the street as well as, proposed developers on some of the neighboring properties was to figure out a way they could they could have enough parking for everybody in the development, but that they could work on sharing the parking between them so that each individual development isn't just a sea of parking to support their individualized users' needs.
Right, especially if they got a lot of retail, whatever a lot is, if they end up getting a lot of retail, where are they gonna park for the retail? They're not gonna go park in the back of the site.
That's why they do provide dedicated parking areas next to the retail building as well as parallel parking along the frontage of Building D. There's also, there is the parking to the north of Building D that will be close enough to both the common house user as well as, the retail along the front of Building D. Part of the hope with the live, work, play is that some of the residents, while they're not there during the day, they're not necessarily using the parking during the day while they're not there. The retail users would be using that, and then when that sort of shifts, when they come home from work, a lot of the retail places will be either at the end of their hours or coming closer to the end of their hours. So there'll be less parking demand for that.
Perfect.
So it is a balancing act, and it is one we've left sort of up to the determination of the applicants to know what their users need and how they can balance out between their development and other developments, the requirements for their users.
Okay.
Okay, we have covered a lot of these. I mean, the multimodal transportation features. I know during the sketch plan hearing, we discussed electric vehicle charging stations, bike storage areas, things like that. He brings up a bus stop. I think somewhere in the mixed-use district, there needs to be accommodation or some sort of future plan for 2 or 3 bus stop locations would probably make sense for that. Does this one, is this a good time to do that?
It could be an ongoing conversation between towns, the applicants, and our GRTA.
Right.
We knew going into this that at the front end of it, our GRTA is not going to want to expand out bus service to this area right now. Buses
'Cause
go
there's nobody to
down
use
441 to Target. They
Right.
only come up Browncroft as far as the Browncroft apartments there, and then there's one that goes up Empire Boulevard up to Baytown, and ultimately up Ridge Road into Webster. So there's not really an existing bus network that comes out this far east in Penfield. But with the focus on high density, living and commercial here, we knew that in the future, the demand could be there, but at this point, there's not the warrants for them to expand service out to this area.
Right.
It is a desire that we'd have that eventually, that there would be, our GRTA service, in this area, and that they could build this into one of their networks to provide an alternative method of transportation that doesn't rely exclusively on cars and highways.
Okay. Talked about the private versus open space. One question also is the fire pit sitting area on the north side up 5 feet. Is that 5 feet above the elevation of that north-south road? Or is that 5 feet above the elevation of the parking lot north of Building D? And
I'm
if-
not sure
if
that's
the
something we could
elevation
ask
of the,
applicants.
If it's up 5 feet, how is ADA
Yeah.
accommodated?
That's
So
something
that's
we can ask
something
the
that they should.
applicants. I think it's, I
It's just something that we
believe
could put in
at
the
the
letter.
road. Yeah,
and-
it's level with the road, and that it sits up higher than the parking area below it. But that's something that either we can see Bill nodding in agreement. So I think that's how it is. It's the fire pit area is at grade with the road, the north-south road, and it'll just sit higher than the parking area.
Yeah, and then there's the overarching concern about how do you get viable businesses to commit to locating there, and how do they survive? And that is a chicken and egg thing that I think we're gonna be struggling with until this whole area gets moving and shaking.
Built out, yeah.
I mean, somebody came to me and said, hey, rent 2,000 square feet at $15 a square foot or whatever, and, you build it, they will come. I'd need to be convinced that they're gonna come.
So we have worked
So-
on securing guarantees in it. In the Penfield Square, there were specific provisions in the resolution that did provide financial incentive to ensure that the commercial would eventually be built out. Staff is aware, and we're very cognizant both that, until this area starts to really build out and there is the population density center, that, it will be harder to attract commercial, and especially right now, when we started mixed use in 2017, or, started, really looking at mixed use applications in 2017, 2018, we had no idea that there'd be a global pandemic that would shutter small retail. So we are hopeful that that will rebound, as the vaccine rollout, continues, and we can hopefully get back to closer to normal, pre-pandemic life, that those retail businesses will start to bounce back, and there'll be more folks out looking to expand into retail commercial spaces or other commercial user, not necessarily retail, but other commercial users, would be looking to branch out and to move into this area. So staff is cognizant, we're aware that that is, it is a little bit of a chicken and the egg game. It is a little bit, retail is hurting right now, and we understand that. So it would be something we look to work to secure through the resolution and other ways that we can ensure that even if it isn't built out immediately, that it is something that is built out as the area develops, and that we really focus on that. I do know we have met with prospective commercial tenants for the other mixed-use development area, with our business development director, Jim Costello. We have met with prospective ones, so we are hopeful that even amid the pandemic and the new sort of newness of the mixed-use district, that commercial users will have commercial users that can thrive here.
Okay, good. There's a couple things in terms of in the letter and sketch letter, bring up lighting. I think that these areas, it's going to be important to have good aesthetic architectural lighting so that if somebody wants to take a walk at night, that it's attractive and welcoming and visually pleasing. So that's something for them to consider. Architecture, everybody remembers the renderings and so on that they brought forward. Comments, concerns, everybody generally okay with the overall conceptual ideas for their architecture?
I am.
I'm good.
So am I. I think that it does a pretty good job of fitting in with the rest of the neighborhood and the town. Any other, there's a lot of items on our checklist that really are staff, utilities, stormwater, a lot of details like that.
Landscaping consultant obviously will take a look at it. It's mentioned, yeah, definitely.
So you guys good with what we've covered? Is there anything that we're missing to put in a letter that's going to be a deal breaker here? Or something that's, we need to put in this letter before we get moving toward preliminary final, if that's the way they want to go?
I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm all set.
You guys have enough to,
Yeah, we have enough to get a letter drafted for you guys.
okay, somebody want to move to send a
I'll move to send the letter.
second?
I'll second. Whatever.
We'll give it to Canower.
Bobby G.K.
Hetzke,
Hetzke, aye.
Bastian,
Bastian, aye.
Canower,
Canower, aye.
Tidings.
Tidings, aye.
Okay,
All right, thank you. I'll begin drafting a letter. I'll circulate it to you guys for your approval prior to sending it out to the applicants, just to give you guys the opportunity to review it.
okay. All right. Do we have anything else to cover tonight?
That is all we have for you guys tonight.
Okay. Guys, online, thanks everybody for showing up, attending. Hopefully it was useful and enlightening. And with that, we will adjourn, call the meeting closed, and have a great couple weeks.
Thank you.